Another season in the bag, Clay. Enterprise, season 1, knocked out. Powerful performance by us, if I do say so myself, to get to this point.
I think so.
Yeah. It's we'll probably do a wrap-up video at some point, or in the next few days, I guess, just to do as we normally do to sort of wrap up and recap the entire season. It's always easy in the first season because you remember stuff. But do you have any sort of takeaways of Enterprise's first season here that you want to just say initially?
I think you're really overestimating my ability to remember stuff at this point.
The first one's always easy because you can't confuse yourself with previous seasons.
Yeah, I mean, if you just give me the lead into whatever we're talking about, I can be like, oh, right, that one. But I'm not going to be able to be like, episode 5 was where things really took a turn.
Really peaked in episode 7, I think. That was personally where everything came together. Yeah, we'll do that. We'll do mostly in the recap. I mean, did you feel that Shockwave was an appropriate way for this first season to end? I guess that's a better way to tie it into this sort of relevant to this episode thing. Before we get into it, just a sort of general sense of whether or not it worked for you.
I don't know, honestly. I'm kind of conflicted about this episode because I feel like I don't know if it totally worked for me. I didn't hate it, but I mean I guess it's kind of par for the course with everything else, where it's sort of like competently made and the middle is kind of boring, and it ends up having something to have involving an overarching plot that I couldn't care less about. So
it covers all the bases for Enterprise.
Yeah.
Let's take a break. We'll play a clip from Shockwave, and then we'll come back. And we'll break down the very final episode of the first season of Star Trek Enterprise.
You finished the diagnostics?
I've analyzed 6 of the pod sensor logs. I have 2 left.
We'll get them done. You've had 3 hours. What about the Enterprise sensor logs? They must have recorded how much tetrazine was in the atmosphere. Was the concentration greater than the paragon specified? Was it present at higher altitudes than it was supposed to be?
That's the weird part, sir. The tetrazine levels were less than 3 parts per million. That's half what the protocol specified.
All right, so Shockwave is the 26th episode of the first season of Star Trek Enterprise. It aired on May 22nd, 2002. It is the first of the 2 arc episodes, the first of the 2 episodes in the Shockwave arc, as we're going to get to part 2 next season. It is 5 of 13 for the Temporal Cold War arc, written by Rick Berman and Brandon Braga, directed by Alan Croker, and universe date is February 2152. And the 8th of April, 2151, and then circa 3052 at the very end. I
feel like if the Temporal Cold War was a baseball player, they would be hitting about 5 for 13 at this point.
Yeah. That's actually not that bad for a baseball player. Yeah, that's a pretty solid at bat. In this episode, after apparently causing the destruction of an alien colony, the Enterprise is called back to Earth. Archer learns via Daniels that the Suliban are trying to sabotage Enterprise's mission. First things first, I think this is a great example of why Enterprise does cold opens so strangely, where I think every other Star Trek show would have had the explosion Shockwave, and then a character would have said, Archer would go, "What the hell just happened?" And then Hoshi or someone would say, "The colony's gone.
They're all dead.
Everyone's dead." And then it cuts to the credits. Enterprise does this strange thing where it cuts short its cold opens, and it's just the explosion that you see, and the shuttle gets like rocked or whatever. And it's, I think I would like almost objectively say it's better to leave that little bit of they're all dead kind of before you cut to it, instead of just random explosion and the ship falls, off course or whatever. But that's a very minor point, but it's something that Enterprise consistently does with its cold opens, I think.
Yeah, it's really, I find their cold openings fascinating because they're not hooks, and they should be hooks. Like I guess you could argue, well, the explosion, that's something. It's like, oh, sure, but it's like
happens every week. There's always an explosion.
Yeah, it's like the equivalent of like the check engine light going on in your car or something, where it's like, oh, well, yeah, it could be something, but might as well just keep driving.
What's the worst that could happen?
It's a stylistic choice that I don't understand why they did it, because it's not benefiting or changing the show or making it more unique. I mean, I guess it's making it more unique, but it's not see it as a benefit.
Yeah, this one just stuck out to me just because right after that you come back to the conversation of they're all dead, and it's just it just feels like a strange place to clip it right there. A lot of them are sort of slice of lifey little vignettes that they put on that are not really attached to anything, or they just do the bare minimum of setting the course. Like there's a lot of Enterprise cold opens that are them talking to like a trader or something who has information, and he tells them to go visit some planets, and then when the episode comes in after the credits, they're visiting the planet. So it's this sort of like very weak setup to things, and I think Shockwave is somewhat effective in its introduction. At least it has the very Star Trek-y intro of like a matriarchal society. What the hell could that all be about?
Yeah, as soon as I heard that, I was like, "Up, here we go."
Buckle in. But at the same time,
didn't get there, unfortunately.
I think Shockwave is actually probably one of the top 3 episodes of the season in a lot of ways. Shockwave to me feels very much like it's the bookend to Broken Bow at the start, like down to how the episodes are almost similarly structured to each other, where there's this action sequence towards the end that you're like, okay, like fine. I think this one's a little bit better than Broken Bow, but it did. If you ignore everything, the 24 episodes in between Broken Bow and this one, it does feel like they logically connect to each other, and that this is the end result of what the Broken Bow mission started out to be. You know, like I do think it succeeds in that way, that it Archer comes to a horrible catastrophe that makes the entire Starfleet wonder if they're ready to do this kind of thing at this point. That works with the sort of naivete of Broken Bow, where they're like, we can do anything. Let's go out and see. And while we've argued that the Enterprise episodes in the middle there have kind of shown Archer and the Enterprise to not really be ready to go out there, Archer's never had to confront that, really. It's just kind of like they realize that they made a mistake and then they resolve it. Here, Shockwave, and I'll throw it to you, Shockwave to me feels like at the end of the season, the writers saw all the missteps they had made, and they kind of wrote an episode in the mold of what they were doing that reconciles, or at least brings to light the fact that they recognize that there are these issues in Enterprise, and they write an episode that feels like it's a clarification or a like resetting of the plot as to what this show should be at this point. And at least the first half of Shockwave succeeds for me because of that.
Yeah, I really like the first half of it. I found the concept of them dealing with possibly accidentally destroying an entire civilization really intriguing. Yeah, especially for them as the first mission out from Earth, and this is the first real, capital C catastrophe that they've dealt with. That they, at least to a point, thought that they were responsible for. I really like that stuff. It falls apart for me. I don't know. Maybe it's a personal thing. I just don't care about the temporal Cold War. It's just I feel like they are not really. They're not really making any distinction as to how it works or kind of what the rules are, but they keep throwing out these things that feel like you're opening a huge can of worms as far as time travel goes, where like they have this conversation with Archer and Reed, where Reed says something like, well, how come they haven't followed, or they don't know that we didn't do this? And then Archer says, well, it's because it's not written yet. And I was like, oh, Jesus Christ. That's just, that's just, I don't know. That just makes my eyes instantly go cross time travel wise when he starts saying that stuff. But there's stuff about it that I do like. I don't know if they're going to go this way, but I really like the idea that now Malcolm Reed knows that there is a USB drive in this dead guy's room that has future schematics on all of these weapons that their enemies might have. Yep. And whether or not he feels tempted to exploit that or whatnot. That's kind of interesting.
Future ships, the Defiant is one of the images and stuff like that.
Oh, is it really? Yeah. I was wondering if there were future ships in there, but I didn't see any I recognized, but I must have missed the Defiant. I was looking for something like the Enterprise D or something.
That probably would have been too. I think it's like the Defiant, and then there's like a Excelsior class or something. There's some sort of class that's generically just known to be a future version of the ship. Yeah.
But yeah, not that they even really hinted that that's going to happen, but in the Malcolm Reed in my head that I want him to be, it's a possible plot thread.
It's a pretty lame. They did once they locked up Daniel's quarters in the end of Cold Front. They apparently just didn't do anything with his room. They didn't go in and be like, it's not like this thing is hidden in some kind of crazy way. They just go into his like gym bag and pull out this device that's from the future and they play it and do everything. But it's so they haven't gone into the room, I guess. So they haven't done any kind of search of what was in there. They just decided that they wanted to lock it up. I mean, I thought that this is the best Temporal Cold War episode so far because I don't think that they really explain things. I liked even though Archer going back in time to that point doesn't amount to anything, I kind of liked the sequence of him going back in time to that day.
I 100% I completely forgot about the Cold War thing for a second, and I was like, this got to be Q. This is what Q does,
right? Yeah,
this is the kind of shit Q pulls. And this is the season finale. I could see them dropping Q on you in the last episode, as the kind of end of season Hail Mary kind of thing. I didn't mind that scene, and I was thinking about it afterwards. I was like, why did they do that? Why did they send him back 10 months? And I guess it was
to the day before Enterprise launches. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it was for Archer's benefit as a way to prove that the existence of time travel or something. I don't know. Mm-hmm. It's just an odd choice, but I guess if you're looking at it in the,
you mean that Daniels had no reason to specifically send him back to that day because he could send him back to like the dinosaurs era and talk to him.
Yeah. Or I mean, I guess my thought is,
or is that a rule in this time travel that Archer? Sorry, is it a rule that because they have a conversation about Archer? He's like, where's Archer of the future? And he's like, he doesn't exist yet. He's like, well, where's Archer of the past? He says, you're Archer of the past. So I guess one of the rules that time travel is establishing in Enterprise is that you can't go back to a place where you don't exist. Although that doesn't seem to exist in Daniels' case, does it? So maybe not. No. Maybe that's not even the point.
And also, he gets jerked into the 31st century, so he's not going to exist there.
Yep.
But I mean,
I'm trying. I'm flailing. I wanted some reason for that to be the reason.
I feel like it's thematically makes sense, even though they don't really put a point on it. But I guess if the whole point of this episode is questioning this mission and blah blah blah, so it makes thematic sense that they would take him back to 10 months, like right before the mission starts.
Yeah, to Broken Bow.
I guess basically. I guess my question is, why does he need to take him back at all? Is the reason they do that in order to try and prove that time travel exists, as opposed to just having Daniels show up
on the Enterprise
or something? Because I mean, there's unless there's rules as to where Daniels can and can't appear, where it's like, I had to send you back 10 months because I've been outside your apartment waiting for the right point so I can walk into, you know what I mean?
Well,
like he can't just appear on the Enterprise.
I know it doesn't make any sense, but you could almost see it happening because if Daniels is truly dead in Archer's timeline, which they don't really explain how he survived what happened to him, you can make an argument that maybe he can't exist in that timeline anymore because he's deceased. So he has to bring him back to the past.
I assumed the Daniels that we saw die is the end of his timeline. So the end of Daniels' timeline. So the stuff that he's doing with Archer takes place before the element for Daniels takes place before the point that he dies on Enterprise.
Then how can he be in the future at that point?
Exactly. I was just going to say that. Yeah.
That's interesting.
Well, I mean, technically, I guess he could if the Daniels from the future is still the Daniels who ends up going back to Enterprise to ultimately get killed.
Yeah, but it's apparently to him a new timeline at the end. It's not the place that he would expect. If it was the future that Daniels knew, you could make that argument. I think that this is Daniels of the future who has not yet gone back in time to meet Archer or whatever. That's very confusing, and I'm certain they're not going to go down that path of like how the time travel works in this.
Probably.
So instead, they kind of just shake it off, and Daniels just I assume it is just a thematic thing of like we're going to go back to the beginning of Broken Bow because this whole Shockwave episode is a commentary on how the mission has gone to this point, which is bad. I I both like and dislike it because I like the fact that it truly feels like it's the first episode where Archer has to think about what he's done and whether or not there are ramifications of the mission being called off, and he's kind of moping around in his bed and T'Pol's insulting him and stuff like that.
Surprisingly few. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I was going to say surprisingly few scenes with him vocalizing that, though. He does a lot of kind of moping.
He does a lot of moping, looking at the window, laying in bed. He's got a couple. He's got the one where he yells at Trip and T'Pol and tells him to get the fuck out of his room, and then he's laying in bed in the next one, and T'Pol talks to him. I think that the really unsatisfactory part to me here is that Archer doesn't solve anything of this. Daniels just gives him literally all the information that he needs to do, and so that snaps Archer out of it. So you don't have this nice character growth of Archer. You know, it kind of undercuts it because the catastrophe was not really their fault. That story only really means something, and it only means something in the cumulative, the culmination of all the stories that we've seen in the first season to this point, where Archer is starting to realize that his actions have ramifications. And because they undercut that and they don't allow Archer to have caused this disaster, because that's not the way that this plot is going to work out, all of his moping is for naught. He doesn't have to think about what he did because he didn't do anything wrong. And as Reed tells us 17 times during this episode, the plasma doors were shut, the plasma vents were shut, like this couldn't have happened. And so all of that sort of like self-reflection falls by the wayside, and then it just turns into what I assume you don't really like about it, which is just the temporal Cold War stuff at that point.
Yeah, even that, honestly, the part that really kind of took me out of it was they do that storytelling device where Archer gets the solution told to him, and then they go through the motions of putting it into play with the audience having no information as to what they're doing until they do it.
Right.
And I find that kind of a cop-out and a little bit, I don't know, I just don't find it very satisfying, because then you're watching, the idea is that you're watching them do all this technical stuff that they're not explaining. They're just talking about it, and you've got the other characters going like, well, I don't know what this is, but if you say this is the thing to do, this is the thing to do. And ultimately just for the payoff of, oh, so they built a scanner that could tell where the...
right.
You know, I don't know. It's.
I thought the weakest part of that was they actually draw attention to it through the Trip and Archer scene, where Archer is explaining what Trip needs to do to either find the ships or something, or juice up the engines. And Trip is like, I don't know what kind of, I can't even understand what kind of quantum mechanics you're talking about. Like, how do you know to do this? And Archer's like, remember that time traveler Daniels from the future who died? And Trip's like, yeah. Archer's like, I talked to him and he told me what to do. And he's like, but I don't have time to tell you what we're doing. Just go back to it. And Trip just goes, oh, okay. Trip has no reaction to Archer meeting the time traveler again who died, and he doesn't have any questions. He's like, oh, sure, like you met him again. That makes a lot of sense. Just tell me what to do then. So it's a very strange sequence.
That scene is kind of one of those scenes that I don't like, where it's just technobabble for the sake of technobabble, because I feel like you could get a scene out of that where it's like the Archer talks about all this quantum mechanics stuff, and then Trip is like, well, how do you know that? And Archer's like, oh yeah, this dead time traveler told me. And then they kind of like have a scene based on that, instead of it just being a lead into more talking about mechanics and, you know, putting pieces together and stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, I mean, I think that scene kind of hints at, I would argue it's not very effective, but it's designed to show you that Archer has been told something from Daniels without Archer just coming out and saying it.
Well, that's the other thing. Like, I
just don't know why he doesn't tell Trip. Like, if Trip is asking about it, there's no reason that... It's only because he doesn't want to tell the audience what's going on that he doesn't explain to Trip what the problem is.
That's what I don't like, is when you've got the scene with him and Daniels, and he's like, well, what am I supposed to do about it? And Daniels is like, sit down, and I'll tell you everything. Hard cut to Archer now knowing everything, but the audience knowing nothing. And Archer is now explaining this techno stuff to Trip, who he's also not telling anything. and the rest of the crew, who he's also not telling anything because he can't tell the audience anything because the audience needs to, for some reason, not be in the know about what's going on because that would bring up too many questions, I guess.
Yeah.
But it's just, I don't know. I just don't like it when stories and shows do that, where the characters get this information off screen and then we spend the next 10 minutes watching them implement this information in a way that is ultimately, I don't know, it's not really that great of a payoff. I don't feel like there's a benefit to withholding it. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, because your options there are,
because like what's more interesting, the watching Archer, watching the crew members of the Enterprise blindly follow these directions from a possible future schematic, or them actually knowing what's going on and that becoming part of the discussion and narrative drama of the scene.
yes.
You know, they get you get a little bit with Reed, but even there, Reed's on board pretty quick.
Yeah.
Where he's like, oh, yeah, of course. There's
Don't look at
all
that.
these ships.
Don't look at that. That's
Yeah.
from the future. We came here for one reason, Malcolm, and that's to look at this one schematic that's unfortunately buried under these other 50 schematics that we have to look at first. Yeah.
I mean, you just walked Malcolm Reed into a room full of pineapple and you're telling him not to taste them, you know?
Is that pineapple juice on your face, Malcolm? I think that right. So I feel that's a consistent Enterprise storytelling weakness, really. It's that they have an idea that they want to get from point A to point B. They know they have to kind of do something, but they don't really want to get into a thematic or like analytical approach to what they're talking about. So what they do is they say, we'll lightly disguise this as a mystery. And that, like, I wouldn't even say this is a mystery. It's just a mystery because the audience is like, well, I have to see where this is going. But It's almost like you have the sequence where you're like, all right, we're going to spend 5 minutes on this thing where Archer is telling these guys what to do, and they assemble these scanners that are going to be able to allow them to see the Suliban ship. And so no matter what story direction we take, we have to show this sequence. This edit has to happen this way. The problem is if Archer tells them at the start, them building it for 5 minutes feels like it's a complete waste of time, right? So you make it a little bit of a mystery where you're like, well, we don't know what we're doing, so it's kind of cool to watch them build something that you don't know what it is. It's not really cool is the problem, or it doesn't feel like it really is necessary to do any of that stuff.
Yeah.
Daniels. I do want to talk about Daniels.
I still wish Daniels was Mayweather. It would be so much more interesting.
Daniels, I don't think there's really any part of the temporal Cold War to this point that I would say like this is strongly thought out or this seems to be a good idea. And judging by what I was reading about it, it really seemed like when they were developing the series, Paramount or UPN or whatever was like, you have to have some kind of futuristic angle to this. Like we're okay with the prequel, but you have to do something
futuristic angle. You guys do know what the concept of Star Trek is, right?
I know we're in the future now, but if we're in the earliest Star Trek, we need something even more futuristic. So they inserted this temporal Cold War thing. The way that Daniels acts and the way that he goes about things I think is a good indicator of the show itself doesn't know what the temporal Cold War is about. Because I don't think Daniels is portrayed as incompetent in this, or at least he's like no one has ever accused him of being incompetent. He doesn't seem to be incompetent. But for a time traveler from the future who's familiar with how delicate time tampering seems to be, he's constantly amazed that the timeline is altered. Like every time he walks into something, he's like, I can't believe this happened. Like how did this? He comes across as incredibly naive as to what he's doing. But at the same time, he always seems to think that telling Archer what to do will result in the right thing that he's expecting to happen. And these time cops only seem... He always states that his mission is like, I can't interfere, but all he does is interfere. And then it's never brought... Like there's no... I don't even really know what I'm trying to say. So he's in his attempts to not interfere and stay true to his job, he constantly interferes and then is always shell-shocked when something doesn't work out the way that he expected to, and this time leading to his destruction in the 3000 or whatever. It's just, I don't feel that he has a very solid understanding of what his job or what his role is in this, because the series doesn't really know what the temporal Cold War is about at this point, so he is left floundering. only reacting to Archer doing things that he tells him to do, and then it doesn't amount to the thing that Daniels wants to happen in the long run.
Yeah, I always get the feeling that Daniels, the knowledge that the writers have of what Daniels is doing or what his deal is extends no further than the scene he's in.
Right, yeah. He seems to have no understanding of what his entire job is to realize that he can't control things. You know,
right.
it's a kind of contradictory role where these time cops are in control of keeping the timeline the way that it's supposed to be, but at the same time, everything they do alters the timeline going down the road. So it's just a very flimsy philosophical outlook on like what the point of these guys is.
I did like the scene at the end though, where he reacts to the destruction of an entire city as though he misplaced his keys.
Yeah.
he's like, I put them on the counter and I turned away and then I turned back and they're gone.
Yep.
It was like just 10 minutes ago. I was having breakfast over here and then I turned around and I turned back and it was just the entire city was destroyed. I don't know what happened.
That's almost a more appropriate reaction for him though, right? Like he should maybe be not surprised at all that what has happened in the year 3052 or whatever, because he's like, John, we got to go back. We got to fix this. This is not right.
I also feel like to this point they haven't figured out the mechanics of how their time travel works.
No,
because it
always happens off screen.
And Archer just shows up in Daniels' like apartment or something, and then Daniels is like, "We can't send you back. Our time portals are all destroyed." And I'm like, hold on.
When did you ever have a time portal? Yeah.
Do you have a time portal installed in your living room? Is that why he comes directly to your living room?
And his Enterprise cabin, he must have had a time portal in there that his roommate never cared or asked to ask him about.
Or there's some sort of like projectional thing going on, like Terminator. I don't know. Obviously these are questions that don't really matter, but it does kind of speak to how it doesn't feel like they've really thought this through.
Right. I mean, if you're going to do time travel, you just have to pick one angle of approach for your time travel story. Like Terminator is very simple. It's like you go back, the machine is coming back in time to kill you before you can become the guy that's going to win the war against the machines. It's a very simple understanding. You can, if you wanted to dig into the Terminator timeline, I'm sure you could come up with a whole bunch of plot holes about like when does the loop start or whatever happens. But it's
a total paradox.
For the all intents and purposes of what that is, it's a very understandable thing. Where the Temporal Cold War, we still don't really understand what the Suliban are doing. They refuse to tell us anything about why the Suliban want to do this or why the Enterprise's mission is important or anything like that. And the mechanism of time travel is so confused that while it kind of makes sense that in the year 3000, like 31st century or whatever, he does not have the technology to jump back in time, which is kind of clever until you realize we've never seen him do anything with any technology. It just seems to be like he snaps his fingers and that causes Archer to go back in time. So it's unsatisfying in that way too.
Yeah, there's a lot of, for as much as of this episode I do enjoy, there is a lot of fill in the blank, not filled in blanks, I guess I should say, about motivations and how things work. Like even the scene with the Suliban guy and the noob Sabot there, the shadowy guy. He's like, you must capture Captain Archer, and I think the Suliban guy's like, why?
Yeah.
the dark guy's like, he just must be captured.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, okay.
Even
sure.
The lack of knowing what's going on extends to, I think they call him the mysterious humanoid, which is that shadowy guy. But he is so bound by limitation, he can't tell his henchmen why they're doing things. And so that sends you down this path of like, why did the Suliban do anything here? Like we're told the Suliban are getting some sort of benefit out of this relationship. I just don't see the benefit that the Suliban are getting.
I don't know what the Suliban are about. Is the problem. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know what they're about, so I don't know what benefit they could be getting from.
He doesn't tell them future information. He doesn't tell them about like bet on this stock, and they're like, okay, we're going to bet on the stock because we did this other thing for you.
Yeah, I mean, like I understand the concept of a temporal Cold War, and I kind of like the concept of a temporal Cold War. If you've got these two warring sides from the future. This is actually kind of fun. I wish they would do this. The two warring sides from the future who are not going back in time and altering things themselves. They're slipping information to these two sides, which they're making decisions, which then changes the timeline in the future.
Yeah.
So they're not actually like going back and assassinating people or whatever, but they're going back and they tell the Suliban, you need to be here at this point so you can do this thing, and so then they do it, and that makes like some sort of shockwave, obviously, change to the future.
It's very much like the real Cold War. The U.S. and the USSR
Exactly,
didn't
yes.
fight each other actively. They interfered with third world governments and said, like, you do us a favor and you stop the Soviets from coming in and you get this out of it. It's a decent idea for time travel.
It's a cool idea, and it also, I think it would be the most fun if it was not an exact science. So if it was like, if it wasn't a calculated thing where it was like, well, if we move the Suliban into this section, which stops Enterprise from getting to this point, then that means this change happens in the future. If it was more messy than that, where it's like, if we stop it, we move the Suliban into, tell them to move into this area, which then stops Enterprise from doing X, then we think this will happen in the future, but we can't honestly say what else is going to happen or what else isn't going to happen. So then, but I think you need to see what the future is in order for that to really work. Unless you want to like keep sending, if you keep sending guys back and they look different every time to imply that there's been like a
Daniel
big change.
has a different
like
haircut each time.
Yeah, if every time Daniel shows up, like one time he looks like Road Warrior and then one time he looks like he's from like Forbidden Planet or something. Yeah, that would be kind of fun. But yeah, I don't know. It's difficult.
You'd have to know what the real world's Cold War is like. You're either living in a Western democracy or you're living in a Soviet-style socialist government. Like those are the two outcomes that you're looking forward to, or you're potentially seeing as an outcome for the world. The Temporal Cold War, because everyone speaks in riddles and no one wants to tell you what's going on, you just have no... You don't know... It leads to our confusion in all of these scenes where Archer meets with these guys in Silic, the Suliban and stuff. You don't know who's playing him. Like Archer has no idea because Archer doesn't know what the possible outcomes are. So whether or not he trusts Silic or he trusts Daniels, there's no decision making that Archer can make because he doesn't know what they are pushing him to do. He just kind of agrees with whatever Daniels wants to do. And so I agree that if you saw the future and you saw that Daniels is like, this is the kind of future, this is the future the Suliban want, and he shows you some sort of like, Judgment Day-esque future like they do at the end of this one, at least you'd understand why Archer maybe should believe this guy, or this is the outcome that he wants to avoid. And then you can start to have fun with the temporal mechanics of whether or not people are being interfered with and things.
Yeah, I almost kind of wish that they had done, I guess this probably makes it a different show, but I kind of wish they had used Daniels' cabin as sort of like a sports almanac from Back to the Future almost. Where like there's elements in here that they keep going back to that they don't know what they are because they're future elements. But then depending on stories they get into, there's one thing in the cabin that they're like, wait a minute, this thing seems to be involved with this, which then helps them make a decision. You know what I mean? Yep. Just to give a little bit more play to this temporal time travel, change the future, don't change the future thing. Which I think would be a little bit more satisfying. Yeah, because if you're gonna introduce something like a temporal Cold War, you got to go 100% with it. Why even bother? Yeah, you can't. It's not a storyline you can really half-ass because it just comes off as inconsistent if you do it half-ass. And I'd argue that they're half-assing it. Like, okay, temporal Cold War in mind, right? Is the destruction of this colony by the Suliban an accident, or did they do it on purpose? Right. I don't know. Because my understanding they did it on purpose. Well, my understanding of it was it happened by accident while they were putting that tracker on the ship. Or was it not a tracker? Was that something that gave off the spark that lit the shit on fire? I thought, well, this is the thing. I thought they did it because they knew that
Starfleet would call off the Enterprise's mission at that point. So them trying to stop the Enterprise from doing whatever it does in the future is them trying to stop the Enterprise by, getting it sort of put into retirement or whatever. That begs the question, why don't they just blow it up? And why in that Cold Front episode did the Silic character stop the Enterprise from exploding? You know what I mean? Like, so I don't know. I don't know if the Enterprise is supposed to be there or if the Suliban want the Enterprise to accomplish one specific thing that they're trying to direct it towards doing. It just seems inconsistent. But my understanding was that they did it because they wanted the Enterprise to be put into mothballs as a way to stop it.
I see. Okay, because I wasn't sure whether or not that the explosion was on purpose by the Suliban or if it was a byproduct. Because the way that I was reading it was when they were attached to the ship, to the
shuttle.
The shuttlecraft, their vents or whatever were obviously not closed, so they accidentally blew everything up. But I could be wrong.
Maybe you could.
I don't know because I don't feel like they definitively say if that's what happened.
What's the point of the tracker they were putting on them?
I don't know. Maybe I missed that too. Was the tracker meant to be the thing that caused the explosion, or was it just a tracker?
Well, Archer found one in his room, right? Are they just putting trackers on everything? I thought
found one in his room?
Well, didn't Reed come in and he's like, Reed, come to my quarters. And then he has the meeting and then Reed comes in and he's like, I found this, Captain. It was invisible, but I scanned it with a scanner and I saw it. That was in Archer's room.
I thought, really? I thought he brought Reed in because, again, it's information that happens off screen, so you don't know exactly what he's telling him to do. I thought the idea was that he told Malcolm to look for it. But maybe you're right. Maybe it is in the... I don't know.
I remember him saying in his quarters, and then they found another one on the shuttle or something. So...
Oh, there were two of them.
I think there were two of them. I think. I could be wrong, but that's my understanding of it. It's still... I don't think they're being clear about what those trackers are doing or why an invisible ship needs to track something because you can just follow it closely because you're invisible. So
right, I know.
Yeah, I just don't. I don't know, and it's not giving you any answers.
I think a big benefit to this story would be if we knew what the Suliban were after.
Yeah,
like even if we don't know what the Temporal guys, the shady guys are after, knowing what the Suliban ultimately want outside of just being lackeys for the future people would be a huge help because as of right now, it seems like the only thing that they are after is genetic enhancement or something.
Right. Yeah.
But that's not really. That's a hell of a drug if that's all it is.
No, they're not very. They can crawl on the ceilings, I guess. But I think they're just not well conceived because I don't get I don't get a true physical threat thing from them. Like I'm not like like there's a Suliban loose on the ship. Like who knows what'll happen with this genetically enhanced, even xenomorph running around. Even if like in the Cold Front? Is that the episode where they do this for the first time? Yeah, Cold Front. Even if in Cold Front, like Silic, is that his name? Silic is the Suliban, yeah. Yeah. If Silic doesn't blow up the Enterprise and then Archer's like, why didn't you blow up the Enterprise? And he says something like, because if the Enterprise blows up, the Suliban will never become Lords of the Galaxy or some shit. You know? Like something to imply a future goal that they have been told how they can get there by the future people. So then from that point on, you understand the Suliban are trying to knock events in a certain direction in order for a certain outcome to happen. Yep. Which doesn't have to be the same thing that the shadowy future people want. Sure. It could just be like, that's what they're getting out of this. Yeah. Is the Suliban are getting their reward supreme is this. Their reward is supreme galactic power because they've changed the timeline that will also benefit the future people. Or maybe it doesn't. I don't know. Maybe it's just a lie. Yeah, I mean, maybe the problem with this storyline is that there's so many layers to it that are possible. So, like, imagine if that's the case. It becomes fairly narratively interesting if the Suliban reveal that they are this sort of dangerous species that everyone is very fearful of, and they have these genetic enhancements and whatever, and they have these sort of authoritarian goals or whatever. And the way that they want this to happen is that they're like, Jonathan Archer, we need you to stay alive and continue your mission. Archer's in a predicament there where the thing that he's sent out to do and the thing that he wants to do is apparently going to lead to this sort of downfall where the Suliban take over. Mm-hmm. And so he's conflicted about that at that point. And what does that mean? And it's another layer you could go with that. I think I'm just saying that, like, when something is as broad as this temporal Cold War thing where you have so many parties interested and you don't really know what's going on, it could kind of go in any of those ways. And when they don't go in a consistent way, it all obviously seems very inconsistent at that point, and you don't know what's important and what's not important to them.
Yeah. I wish there was some sort of, I don't remember if maybe Daniels talks about this in the first episode he's in, but I wish there was a little bit more of like a constraint on the abilities of time travel as well, instead of it's just like, well, they're just showing up out of nowhere for any reason when they decide that, like, I wish there was some sort of...
It kills you. It drains your life essence every time.
Maybe it doesn't have to be that, or maybe it's like we can only go back for 15 minutes at a time or something. I don't know, something like that.
Yes, it's like the making the phone call on the old payphones where you could call like 1-800, leave a message in as quick a time as possible.
Otherwise, why don't they just? I mean, obviously it's a Cold War, I guess, but why don't they send back like 5 guys? Or
do you think it's living up to the Cold War?
Too many questions.
Do you think it's because I feel that it's far too active to be a Cold War, really? Because Daniels is just like, do this, Archer. This will be. It feels to me much more like an active war.
I feel like Daniels should be more of a Section 31 type guy.
Yeah,
where he's, or maybe not Section 31, maybe more like Deep Throat in the X-Files.
Yeah,
where Daniels shows up and he kind of like nudges Archer in the right direction, but it's not like Daniels just shows up and gives him the whole playbook, you know?
Right. Well, that would be to me, that's the quote unquote, I'm using quotation marks there, quote unquote, Star Trek approach, is if you treated this like a Cold War thing and
inverted commas for our friends
on the other side of the pond.
Yeah.
And if you treated it like a Section 31 thing and you treated it like Sloan, where Daniels was played more like Sloan from DS9, to me, that seems much more of a Star Trek-y outcome where you can have scenes where Daniels' whole position at this point is to convince Archer of something. It's not about telling Archer to do something. It's about saying, don't you understand, for the good of everything that you are looking for here, for the good of the universe, you have to do the right thing. In a way that Sloan does. Like, it's the kind of like, I'm not going to specifically tell you what our plans are, but just know that we have a greater goal in mind here as to what is going on. You can either be with us or against us. And Archer having to think about what his actions mean for the future, which is thematically relevant to everything that he does in the episodes leading up to this, is just a little bit more to chew on than Daniels appears and is like, hey, go into my room and grab this thing and then send that to here, and then we'll go find the ship and shoot it with phasers, and you can run through the hallways and shoot Suliban. It just... There's not a lot of thought in that outcome there.
Well, you know what I think would have been really, really fun is if, you know, you have the 10 months ago scene with Daniels. Daniels is a little bit more cagey about what's going on, but he's telling Archer, he's like, okay, time travel, I'm trying to prove it to you. This is what's going on, X, blah, 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 but he's not giving him everything. And then when he gets back to the future or the present, Archer goes, you know, if this guy's a time traveler, he might have some time travel shit from the future in his room. Mm-hmm. So he gets Malcolm. They bust into Daniels' room and they find this USB drive that has all this future shit on there. And they're like, oh my God, we have all of this information about, we can't, okay, let's just stick to what we're looking for here. Look for a Suliban, something. Then they find that. So basically Archer, it's a Back to the Future 2 situation where he finds the almanac and he uses the almanac to get one thing for himself.
Yeah.
And then ultimately what happens is Daniels yanks him into the future and is like, you idiot, you blew up the entire fucking planet.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, so that way it's not him telling him exactly what to do. It's Archer still getting the playbook, but he's not supposed to be using the stuff from the knowledge from the future to do this.
Yeah.
And it ultimately then causes whatever happened in the 31st century.
It's a little bit of a Pandora's box allegory. Like if Archer knows what this is a little bit, and he's tempted to open it, but he's like, I just have to know what's in this thing that Daniels doesn't want me to open, and that alters the future.
I mean, having that thing, the fact that Malcolm even in that scene doesn't go like, this changes everything. Captain, we have information on enemy ships for the next 200 years.
Yeah.
This just changed everything. We know everything that's going to happen, or maybe it's not that to that point, but we now have information that gives us the upper hand in any situation we're going into. And that's a huge deal.
Yeah.
Especially for the I was going to say Earthlings, the humans who are portrayed up to this point as being behind the eight ball or behind the times with everybody else.
Yeah.
They've now been given or found something that immediately puts them ahead of everybody else.
Yep.
And they don't even really talk. They don't even mention it.
Don't look at that. That's not for your eyes. No, it's true. It opens
From
up
that
a lot
point
of questions.
on. From that point on, every single mission they go on, the first thing they should do is, okay, let's go check the USB drive in Daniels' room and see if it could help us. Yeah. Let's go call Spock and ask him who Khan is.
Yeah. No, I know. That's I don't have too much I guess before we fade away or go to the final section here, fade away. Did you think this worked as a season finale / cliffhanger?
I did. I actually did. Because, these issues I have with it aside, I do think it's actually a pretty solid season ender.
Yeah.
Because I think the first half is really strong. And if you're on board for the time travel stuff, sure, I guess it's fine. And the ultimate, I did like the scene at the end where they discover the Suliban ships following them.
Yep.
That was nice. I wasn't thrilled with the jumping him into the future thing, but I guess, if you've got a cliffhanger, I think it works well, because I legitimately, my response was, well, I don't know how the hell they're going to send him back, so I guess it works.
Yeah.
And you've got kind of an inverse best of both worlds thing where now you've got the bad guys ready to fire on the Enterprise. I thought it worked pretty well.
I like it as a cliffhanger. I think it's pretty effective. I think that it works as a season finale fairly well. Even if it doesn't sort of accommodate everything that happened since Broken Bow, it at least makes me feel like they're aware of what Archer should be feeling at this point. The ending is strange just because it does feel, it feels a little derivative at this point. Like the Matrix had happened. It's hard to look at a scene like that and not think of the Matrix, really, with the sort of burnt out buildings. And there's been a lot of dystopian stuff like that. But the Matrix would have been just a year or two before this. And then just the background information. They were apparently, this struck me as odd, they were apparently very intentionally trying to make it seem like a World Trade Center thing at the end.
Oh, really?
Which feels too soon to do that. I think that feels inappropriate. I didn't get that vibe, and I read that after I'd watched the episode.
You know what's funny? I actually, when they were talking about the colony that had been destroyed, I think the number of people dead was like 3,200 or something like that.
3,600.
And my first thought was, that sounds around the number that died in the Trade Center bombings.
That's true. I didn't think about that, but that's no, that's I guess it's less than a year after that. It just seems, maybe it's intentional. I don't know. How do you feel about that? Is that like that's a weird?
It seems kind of crass.
It does seem crass. Just to,
because like if that's what they're doing, I feel like you don't do that without trying to make a point about it,
right?
And implied or otherwise. And I don't think they're really doing that, because maybe, unless the idea of the shockwave is somehow supposed to be about the actions of the past have led to this catastrophe in the present, or the future rather. I don't know. I think if that's what they're trying to do, it's not really very full-throated by them.
Yeah. No, I'm not crazy about that. I was just surprised that they at least claimed that they were intentionally trying to mimic the World Trade Center sites, because like that's, I think they're still digging that site out at that point. It doesn't feel correct. All right, so let's take a break. We'll play a quote from the episode, and then we'll come back and read some patron thoughts about Shockwave. And then we'll give our final thoughts about the first part of this two-parter and the end of Season 1 of Enterprise.
Where is here?
You're in the 31st century, Captain. Or what's left of it.
You said the Suliban wouldn't follow us. That we'd make it safely to the Vulcan ship.
As far as I was told, that was exactly what was supposed to occur.
So you're telling me this just happened? It doesn't look like it just happened.
No. It looks like it happened a long time ago.
All right, everybody. Thank you very much for listening. Hope you enjoyed the content today where we talked about Shockwave Part 1. If you want to support the show, you can go to patreon.com/thepenskyfile. It's the best way to support the show, and it's much appreciated. You get extra podcasts, you get extra videos, you get behind-the-scenes stuff, you get access to the polls, control our destiny. You can be a temporal Cold War agent and sort of influence the way the things are going to work out for us. And as always, our Captain Tier supporters get a special thank you. Thank you goes to Christian Pouch, Tark Latif, Chris Tinsley, Mike Burnett, Cardinal Doomsday, Joint Mango, Ben Douglas, Neil Brennan, Kyle Barrett, Samuel Custer, Matt Ross, Nathan Elliott, Eric Johnson, Aaron J. Sherlock, Grim Santo, Matt Cutler, Dwayne Hackett, Sean, Jordan Cooper, Russell Elledge, Kevin Reyes, Vault 13 Hero, Stephen Minton, David Beardmore, Joth Marsk, HH28, Matt Courier 6, Jacob 123, Matt Houston, Mike Harris, Nick Sergi, Jakey's Gamer, Patrick Seba, Captain Brazen, Kevin Lowry, Eric Sanchwan, Bradley Killens, Corey Martin, Woodrow, and Rune Vendler. Thank you very much for supporting the show. Much appreciated to everybody. Now let's go to patron thoughts, which again, if you haven't heard, starting with the next episode, we're going to be limiting patron thoughts to 5 sentences. So this section shall probably be a little
Iambic
bit quicker.
pentameter only.
And we will do our best to sort of... the main impetus of this is that I try to stay under an hour of recording time, which we're getting close to now, and also that just to keep the segment relative to the main show a little bit more manageable. It was getting a little bit long in the tooth compared to the other things. Not that the comments are bad, but I just need to be able to get through them quicker. Matt Ross says, possibly one of the best episodes of the season with sci-fi action and mystery. Archer would be racked with guilt, and it's understandable why he would be depressed from what he seems to be his fault for the death of thousands. It's also the first time that Archer shows anything more than an aw shucks gee whiz attitude. The annoying thing again is who the hell are the Vulcans to tell the humans to cancel their entire space program? Who are they? Parents? Get bent. I say accidents happen. If you're making a chemical that will make your atmosphere explode, don't invite flame-powered craft. When you do get the time-traveling stuff, well, there's more to the temporal Cold War, but it's still not that well-defined or interesting until the last scene. The Suliban just twirl their mustaches, and you have really no new information about the war. Daniel's quick wave of timeline paradoxes is a nice shortcut. When he comes back, how did Archer manage all that technobabble? He memorized everything? You know the Suliban won't destroy Enterprise, and you've seen this type of false cliffhanger on the ship. But that last scene still makes me want to go explore the remains of a wrecked San Francisco and find out just what the heck happened.
Is that Matt that left that comment, or Donald Rumsfeld? Jeez, accidents happen. Thousands of people die. It's no problem.
Truth is, what's that Cheney thing? Truth is relative or something like that. A latte librarian says...
relatively accurate.
Shockwave Part 1. Phlox and T'Pol are the bright spots in an episode where Archer mopes about 2 different destroyed planets. Also, Daniel's got a snazzy new suit. 3 spaced Suliban out of 5. Phlox continues to be the best character. I did like his scene with Trip, where Trip is trying to get mad at him, and Phlox is just like, well, everyone's very honorable and doing the best thing here that they can do. It's very true to Phlox's happy-go-lucky nature.
He had a good scene with T'Pol, too.
Yes. What's that one about? That's about she can't understand why he's moping or why Archer's getting all mopey.
Yeah. I thought T'Pol was really good in this episode. I continue to like her quite a bit.
This is the way she should be. This is...
Yeah.
I like the Vulcan. I like her Vulcanness portrayed as. This is not intentionally like semi-autistic. Like she just doesn't get what humans are about, really. And I think that they do this here in a way that makes sense for how a Vulcan would react. Where she's like, "Why is he just moping around? Why doesn't he like do something about this? Like, why doesn't he just act more logically and sort of handle this rationally instead of feeling all emotional about it?" And I like Phlox as the intermediary between that, where he's the only other alien on the ship, but he gets humans on a level better than T'Pol does, and he can kind of explain it to her. I think it works. Yeah. It's good for her.
Yeah, I think if I were gonna do my season 1 power rankings, I think Phlox would be number 1 and T'Pol would probably be number 2 as far as characters go.
Yeah, yeah. Who's the best human?
Best human.
I think it's Trip for me. It would go Phlox, T'Pol, Trip, I think would be my order.
Probably. Yeah, I can't really argue with that, I don't think.
Thank you, Latte Librarian. I did read yours. Yes, I did. Woodrow says, who needs data disks? You've got a sabotage. You know the sabotage device was Suliban because it's green and has scales. The Suliban sure are killing a lot of people just to delay human space exploration. They would be totally overpowered if they didn't have to wait for instructions. Daniel's outfit looks like a still suit from Liberace's Dune, 1 out of 5. I wonder if that comments...
Wow, 1? Really?
Yeah, I give it a 1. The Suliban sure are killing a lot of people just to delay human space exploration. Have they said that to that point? I don't know if Woodrow's reading ahead, not spoiling, but just sort of like acting with an understanding of what comes there. I don't think they've said that in the show. They want to cancel Enterprise. I guess what I'm saying is I get the sense that the Enterprise is more important than the Federation to the Suliban. Mm-hmm. Do you get that sense, or do you think it's that they don't want the Federation to be formed?
Yeah, it seems like Enterprise more than anything else.
Yeah, that's the sense that I get, that Enterprise and Archer by relationship are somehow important. It's kind of it's like the great man theory of history. They just know that Archer's going to do something. If Archer's around and able to do something, it's not that it will generally happen.
I almost wish it wasn't that. I almost wish it was the Federation that they were trying to stop. Because so it doesn't come down to the
humans.
Very Discovery-esque. All of this revolves around you, Archer. You're the key to the entire future of mankind, or blah, blah, blah.
Well, it's also because the season to this point has been about meeting the Andorians. It's been about meeting the Vulcans. So if the Suliban are trying to actively sabotage these new friendships that are being made, or at least these new acquaintances that are being met with humans, that feels more thematically relevant to Enterprise's prequel nature than Archer's the chosen one who cannot be allowed to get the sword out of the stone, or else we're all fucked.
Right. Yeah. Feels a lot more Star Trek to do that.
It does, yeah. That's like a DS9 influence. It's like Star Trek can do that. Star Trek should try to do that, I think. Neil Brennan says, Shockwave Part 1. Okay, we're zapping Wes and Clay back to May 2002. Vanessa Carlton is riding high in the charts. Trucker hats are all the rage, and Enterprise is just wrapping up Season 1. If we put you guys in the writer's room, what would you be pitching, realistically, within the constraints of Trek, etc., for Season 2? What have you learned from 20-plus episodes so far about the strengths and weaknesses of this cast and concept? I'm thinking small fixes and notes, not go full on, not safe for work. So he really kneecapped me there with that last sentence, but...
Well, put the dicks back in the pants, boys.
You can go first if you want.
What would I do for Season 2? Geez, I don't know. It's
more, what have you learned about the strengths and the weaknesses of the cast and the concept?
Well, I think the strengths are the idea that the humans' first exploration into space is not perfect and has repercussions to it, which is what I wish that they would lean into more in the first season. What I don't like about the first season that I would like to change is I would try to give the characters more personality and have them not at odds with each other, but just have them each bring something unique to the situations instead of just being fairly interchangeable as they are now.
The humans are all very interchangeable with each other.
Yeah,
that's why Phlox and T'Pol stand out, because they're actually different personalities.
Right, yeah. But, once you've got Mayweather, Trip, Reed, and to some extent Hoshi are more or less interchangeable for any episode they're in.
Yeah. I'd put Archer. I'd put Archer in there. Archer doesn't act that...
I was thinking Archer as being like the one constant in all of these things.
Oh,
but
sure.
You're right. Yeah. Archer as well is not... He's not as clearly defined as he could be, I don't think.
I would agree about the characters. I think the weakness to this...
I would also shit or get off the pot as far as the temporal Cold War goes, because you either gotta lean into it, or you just gotta hard reset and get rid of it.
Would you embrace it or would you get rid of it in season 2? Say if they're like, after we conclude this in Shockwave Part 2, we can either kill the Temporal Cold War or we can continue it. What would you rather do?
Well, I mean, if the point of the Temporal Cold War is to prevent the Federation from forming, I think it's thematically good. I think it's thematically important and is a interesting element of the history to try and tell it that way. I wouldn't want to overwhelm things with it, but I think I would just, when I say shit or get off the pot, I mean I would just be more clear as to what the stakes are. Yeah. And be a little bit more clear and a little bit more precise as how and when it's used.
Yeah. I would generally opt to not continue the Cold War. If they were to do something where it became clear that it's about stopping the Federation from forming, I would continue it in that context. And I would say that if you go into that idea, there's a lot of room where that strengthens races like the Andorians and the Vulcans. If the point of the Suliban and Daniels to an extent are to highlight and make somewhat effective arguments as to why the Federation ideals don't work in this context, like why it's kind of similar to a DS9 thing, but you need the Suliban and the Daniels characters should be a DS9-esque force that are kind of pushing back on this idea that this is the way the Federation has to go. And they can do very Cold War things where it feels much more Cold War-y if they are stirring the pots between the Andorians and the Vulcans. Like if the Andorian and Vulcan war is found out to be the ramifications of what the Cold War people have been doing to them to stop these groups from getting together, I think that there's room to grow that way. But I'm not interested in this, like, what's this mystery about the Time War? Who's this mysterious man telling me mysterious things? That's not very interesting.
I don't give a shit about that.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think if it was a Federation thing, that opens up your story possibilities too, and how you could use this element and the Suliban themselves. Because I mean, imagine, why does it always have to be Enterprise specific? What if you get an episode that has the Andorians in it, and then the Andorians are getting kind of spicy about whatever, and then Enterprise goes to talk to them, and one of their advisors is a Suliban.
Yeah.
Who has been sent there by the future guys in order to stir some shit up between the Andorians and the humans and the Vulcan. You know what I mean?
Yep.
You can hit it from different angles instead of just focusing on whether or not Enterprise goes down to Mom Planet or whatever that thing they were supposed to do was.
The Great Matriarchy Part 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that...
Unless if what happened on that planet ultimately leads to the creation... Was that Angel 1? Was the planet Angel 1? Because in that case, I'm all for it.
I like that idea. And I also think that redresses the Suliban as a little bit more of a... they're more of a Bond villain crossed with Al-Qaeda at that point. If the Suliban's thing is we don't endorse your way of life, you run into trouble here where it's vaguely reminiscent of the founders of DS9. It's like we don't exist this way, therefore you shouldn't. Where the founders are more, I don't know. I guess we don't have to discuss that. You do run into similarities there, but I do think that Suliban have room to move into a position where they are actively because I don't like them just getting genetic enhancements as a reward. I need like a better cultural reason for the Suliban to be doing things that they're doing, and they choosing not to do it. That would be the difference. And it would also make them a little bit more reminiscent of like the TOS version of the Klingons,
where it's like you're doing something, it's not going right, and then right at the point of highest tension, the door opens and the Klingon steps out, and you're like, it's the Klingons.
Of course, I should have thought it was the Klingons.
They were behind the whole thing. The Tribble knew.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. So to recap, I would work on, even if you kept plots the same, the show would be magnitudes better if the characters were more defined and they were in these relatively boring plots, but at least that was like, I get what these characters are. So my improvement would be, we have to focus on character episodes. You have to do like personal character episodes much more frequently than you did in this one. I don't think they really did them at all in the first season of Enterprise. And strengthen the Cold War arc. Those would be the two things.
This, maybe this is narcissistic of me to say, but why stop now? This Enterprise is a show where I would love the chance to write this as a comic and start from beat one.
From the pilot.
And yeah, and just not scrap everything, but using the pieces given, shape it a little bit differently. Not ignore it, obviously. But just in comic form, adapt it in a different way to tell the story differently and kind of strengthen some of these things. Because I still feel like the concept is really strong.
Yeah.
It's just that it's not totally, they didn't totally shake things out.
Yeah, I'd agree. Thank you, Neil. Next question, next comment is Poindexter G. Time travel has proven that...
Wait, that was Neil's comment? We didn't laugh during it, did we? Because he apparently doesn't like it when podcast hosts laugh.
Did he say that on Twitter or something? I might have missed that. Poindexter...
Yeah, there you go, Wes. Just give it to him. Hard.
How you like that? How you like that, Neil?
He hates this.
How you like me living my life? Poindexter G says, time travel has proven that the Vulcan Science Directorate, goodness, that's a mouthful, is impossible. We finally see how important this mission is. If something bad happens that ends the mission early, it doesn't just stop Enterprise, it pretty much kills Starfleet. I can't say that anyone would take the colony's destruction easily, but I don't like seeing one starship captain wallowing in self-pity. The rest of the episode is largely set up and is serviceable in that effort. Daniels is vague as usual. Time for part 2 to see where this goes. This, yeah, that's another comment that's saying that this is about killing Starfleet. I don't think there's a confirmation in the episode that that's what they do. I would like a scene like that if that's the case. So
right, yeah. This would be the time to do it too.
Yeah,
it's because you've been dancing around this temporal Cold War thing for the whole season. Now is the time to establish exactly what's at stake.
If that were the case, would you have Daniels just be a representative of? He's already said he's not part of Starfleet, though, right?
I don't even remember.
I think in Cold Front he says he's like, I'm from Kansas, and he's like, you're from Earth, and he's like, no, I'm also not in Starfleet. So like he lays out that the future is supposed to be very different, I think, and I don't think he's a member of Starfleet at this point.
I still think there's got to be some sort of crossover that they're doing with season 3 Discovery, right? It's like the same time period. Right?
Here's a comment that's a very apropos comment. So Kyle says, a perfectly cromulent episode. I could practically hear the crumpets falling out of his mouth at that point as he wrote that. I was enjoying the drama more before it connected to the temporal Cold War, but it's still enjoyable, albeit confusing, once the Suliban appear and the action is fun. I particularly like that it's T'Pol who keeps faith in the ship's mission as a nice continuation of our arc. Daniels at the end has the worst combination of costume and haircut ever seen on Star Trek.
It's bad. It is bad.
and because I'm sure the question will come up, Discovery Season 3 is set in the 32nd century, whereas the far future we see here is the 31st century. A strong 3. I've kept this comment to 5 sentences like a good little boy out of 5. Thank you for that.
The key to getting a long comment in from now on is pro-level knowledge of how to use commas, colons, and semicolons.
Yes. I am going to punish run-on sentences for people who try to get away with terrible grammar to extend their comment. He had a comment. He had something. It is a terrible haircut, terrible outfit. His haircut is so strange. It's like they... like when black guys go to the barber, they can sort of cut the edge of their hair. Like the hair sort of allows that to happen, where white people can't really do that, or at least they don't do it. They don't do it to me.
I didn't know this was going to turn into the Def Comedy Jam here.
But
how do white guys drive?
Daniels has a haircut that looks like they razored up his forehead a good 2 inches, and it's like his hairline is further down. There's no reason why his hair is all the way up there. It's
he looks like Mark Zuckerberg.
He does look like Zuckerberg. Does Zuckerberg do that?
I think the real question is Zuckerberg an agent from the future?
Well, clearly. He came back with futuristic technology that changed our entire world.
That's a good point.
Let's see. Eric Sanchuan says, 2 comments left. Enterprise is a pretty lousy first season, doesn't it? It's not that the series is quote-unquote terrible or that there's anything inherently wrong. It's just that the general milieu feels boring and the characters and situations are stock. All of this contributes to a general sense of Star Trek burnout, which I guess was only natural after a reinvigorated TV franchise that had been spreading through the airwaves of syndication across several series of varying quality for the better part of 15 years. For what it's worth, the series will get better, I promise. It will get so much better that you might actually get a bit depressed about how good it actually actually is, but man, oh man, we are simply not there yet, and I'm afraid it's still a ways. Hang in there, gents. Thank you for your support. Captain Brazen says, it's been a long road getting from there to here, wherever here is. The first season of Enterprise has a strong sense of where it wants to go and what it wants to say, yet the show doesn't double down on saying anything meaningful or impactful in this episode. The show has heart and yet no pulse. To illustrate this further, a few months ago, my best friend made the slightly dumb move of watching Enterprise as his first Star Trek show ever instead of TNG or TOS, and he was bored by the end of the first season. Wes and Clay, I will tell you both what I told him. It does get better. 3 faith of the hearts, hoping it gets better out of 5.
You know, do you think they talk about this as being a result of Star Trek burnout, and this was in a period of time where Star Trek was popular enough to merit so much going on?
Enterprise, you think?
Yeah, well,
I would argue
like
it's on the downslide of that.
Yes, it is. It definitely was, yes. But like at that time, you had TNG was popular, Voyager, I don't know, Deep Space Nine was popular for a while. The movies were doing well to a point. Like it seemed popular enough to warrant a bunch of stuff. Mm-hmm. I feel like they're trying to force their way into that now, where you've got Discovery, Picard, Lower Decks, this Nickelodeon show.
The Academy
just seems
show
like,
that's coming out.
Yeah, it seems like they're throwing a lot at you all at once, and it's not like, you know, like remember 5 years ago or so, Doctor Who was like the biggest show in the world as far as like genre shows go.
Yeah,
and they never did they did a spin-off, I think, but it wasn't like there were 5 different Doctor Who related shows going at the same time. I don't know. It's just weird to me that it seems they're really throwing everything at the wall as far as Star Trek goes.
It's a balancing act, right? Where I'm never going to say that Star Trek was some non-brand IP thing that the studios were aware of that they could use. Obviously, they were. Like in the 90s, they had a bunch of spin-offs of TNG. TNG was successful. They made 2 spin-offs immediately as soon as TNG was about to wrap up, and they ran them concurrently. Enterprise stuck around a little bit. It feels a little bit different now. The mechanism is different because they had to create so much content for CBS All Access because no one stays subscribed to CBS All Access unless they have Star Trek shows on. At the same time, it's hard to say whether or not it'll work better or worse because what they're doing now does feel like they're adding some diversity in like what kind of shows they're making out of it. Mm-hmm. So the 90s, all the Star Treks kind of felt the same. But you can make an argument that made it feel more like it was a cohesive universe that was going on. And I think that a lot of the problem with things like Lower Decks, which is just kind of like, I would say a lot of this is just like inane, like get cartoons out of my Star Trek kind of like weirdness that people are responding to it. But it is hard to say that a cartoon will ever be able to maintain a sense of cohesive universe with Star Trek. And people will say that the Clone Wars is the best thing that Star Wars has done recently, and that's animated, so I might just be talking out of my ass, but I think that's the big difference, is that once they start spreading into different kinds of shows with the Star Trek brand labeled on top of it, people are... You no longer have just a blanket fandom that's like, I like Star Trek. Now you have to start saying, I like Star Trek that's like this. And you have to start detailing more into what it is. And I think people are kind of bitter that that's going away.
Well, I was thinking just now, because I was thinking, man, between Discovery, Picard, and Strange New Worlds, is that the Pike show they're doing?
Pike show, yep.
That's 3 live-action shows all running at the same time.
Section 31, too.
Section 30, sure. Yeah. Is that happening still? Let's assume that it is.
I think
so you got 4 happening.
Yeah.
I was like, man, that's crazy. But it actually kind of makes sense if you think about the way that shows work now. Because in the 90s, you had 27 episodes a season with like a 3-month break, and then you're back at it again for 27 more episodes.
Yep.
And
it was basically on the air the entire year, really.
Yeah. And you're doing it as cheap as possible, but it still costs a couple dollars to do all this stuff. Now you've got shorter seasons, but episodes that take longer to produce because of they're so effects heavy.
Yeah.
So if you're staggering your shows, you can actually maintain that consistency of brand, but you are giving these shows the time that it needs in order to get things done.
Yeah.
It's not like, it's weird because it's like if it was Doctor Who or if it was Game of Thrones, if there were 2 years between seasons of Discovery, I mean, I guess there's going to be 2 years between seasons of Discovery.
They haven't announced a new season start date yet. It's a long way away.
Yeah. But it would be like, I feel like it doesn't feel as weird because it's something that people are like actively anticipate. I mean, there obviously are people actively anticipating new Discovery. I mean, honestly, I am. I'm curious to see what they do.
Mm-hmm.
But having all these shows to go at the same time, but like staggering the seasons of them kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
Because while you finish a season of Discovery, then Picard starts up a couple months later, and then you've got Strange New World. So you've got another year and a half that you can work on getting Discovery up to snuff for the next season. So it's an interesting tactic.
Yeah.
If that's what they're doing, I'll be interested to, as they say in dodgeball, it's a bold strategy. Well, let's see if it pays off.
It's diversifying content while also not really creating that much more than you would expect during DS9 and Voyager and TNG running concurrently. It's just
it feels a lot when they talk about it.
It does.
Because they're always like, Discovery, Lower Decks, Picard, Strange New World, Section 31, Nickelodeon show. That other thing that you said that I don't remember because I wasn't aware of it. It's like when you say it all at once, it's like, Jesus Christ, give us you're flooding the market that wasn't really that big to begin with.
Yeah. There's much more hype for this stuff, and obviously we share the Discord, and we have to think about the podcast. So there is when a new show is announced, the back of my brain goes, "Oh fuck! Like I have to talk about this show now as well." And so there's that kind of negativity to it, and obviously like my Twitter and the Discord is based on me like following Trek Twitter things and then retweeting whatever they say, which is just endless announcements at this time of the year, which is definitely more to be in it as it's happening. Is definitely different than to look back retroactively at DS9 and Voyager, where we can ignore any kind of hype or advertising that was going on, and it's just the product that we're looking at.
Right.
This is different in that case. And I'm not, you said Game of Thrones. Would Game of Thrones support a cartoon series if you were to branch it out? Star Trek's kind of unique in that way. I don't think a Game of Thrones cartoon would work, really.
Yeah, I think it depends on the tone.
Like if it's a real dark anime thing, I guess maybe. But
that would be cool, actually. Yeah, I think it would have to go either one of those two ways. I think it would have to go either like a dark, intense anime kind of thing, or
did you see Castlevania on Netflix?
I didn't.
Yeah.
I've heard mixed things about it.
It's very mixed, but I imagine that style would work. It's very bloody, very murderous. Yeah.
Yeah. However, I do think given the fandom around Game of Thrones, I think it would work going the other way as well if you did more of like a Lower Decks thing where it was a little bit more funny and
the guys who clean up the horse shit for the people who are fighting each other.
You know, like there's a lot of humor baked into the corners of the Game of Thrones universe. I think you could probably, just look at how many podcasts and shows there are now that are just people playing Dungeons and Dragons.
Yep.
I think you could probably take Game of Thrones and turn it into a funny cartoon.
Agreed. Thank you, patrons, for leaving your thoughts about this one, Shockwave Part 1, the season finale of Enterprise Season 1. If you want to support the show, you can go to patreon.com/thepensky Files. It's the best way to do it. I guess we didn't give our ratings yet. We should do that first before I start plugging everything. I'll mention the Patreon again, just in case you skipped that bit. What are you going to give this one?
I'm going to give it a 4.
Wow.
Yeah.
Although I think it's a 4 for me as well. I don't know why I was surprised by that. I think it is a 4.
Yeah.
It's I give Dear Doctor, Unexpected, and this one a 4 on my scale.
I don't think this is as good as Dear Doctor, but I think it is for the shows that we've seen up to this point. This is definitely on the better than average side.
I'd agree with you. It's top 3 for me. I think I would put it 3rd after Dear Doctor and Unexpected. So that's fine. It's good to go out with a high note there, I suppose, for Star Trek Enterprise. Relative high note. It sounds like I guess we just complained about this one more than I thought we were going to end up giving it a 4. But I do like the first 20 minutes of this one. That felt like Enterprise knowing what it was doing, really, is my takeaway.
Yeah. Yeah, complaints aside, I think as an episode of Enterprise, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
The beginning is compelling. It gets murky with the time travel stuff, but it does its job, and the last 10 minutes or so are better than not.
Yeah. We didn't talk about the action sequence. Do you want to just give any thoughts about the raiding the Suliban ship action sequence?
Oh, yeah, it was fine. It seemed a little, I don't know.
Gratuitous. I mean, I
that's
understand
another thing.
having to do it. I thought it was I thought it was their best directed action sequence. I like a lot of the low camera work as they're running through the ship. It feels like a lot of do about nothing, really, where they got the disc and they get the hell out of there, and that's pretty much it. But
yeah, it's a little bit more of my problem with the episode, where it's like at that point you don't even know what they're going there to get.
Yep.
It's just we found this thing, we have to break into it. Why? Well, we're not going to tell the audience why, and then they ultimately do, and it's like, oh, all right, I guess.
Yep. Use that transporter. Use that. That's what this. You're not going to beam humans. Beam that thing right off there, Archer.
Yeah, it's a lot of putting faith in the audience that the immediate tone they're giving you by the action they're showing you is going to keep you engaged more than the reason for any of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
Where it's like action sequence. Well, it's a good looking action sequence. Hopefully people respond to it and they don't go, well, what the fuck what are they even doing here?
Right.
Like, why, what's this thing? Oh, it's a disc. It's okay.
Yeah. Yep. I'd agree. We'll both give it 4s. So Enterprise goes out with a high note, which is nice. And we'll be back with season 2's opener, which is Shockwave Part 2, the conclusion to this one. And then we start off on the 25 or 24 episodes of Enterprise Season 2, which is a mix of things, some interesting things, some not interesting things. But
do they ever reveal who the shadowy guy is?
They do not.
Really?
Yep.
Never in the whole show.
There's some sort of theory.
Is it the chef?
Or Braga floated the idea that it's Archer.
Really? Because my thought was that it was the Admiral.
Oh, yeah. He's a character who's in it enough that you think this guy's up to something. It's Archer.
Exactly,
Archer talks to him enough where you think you could see this guy going bad. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought maybe it was some sort of future version of the Admiral, or the Admiral operating from information from future people or something.
I'm sorry to bring up random things, but I guess I want to say it before the Enterprise's first season runs out, is that if I were rewriting the show, as you had said, if you were to draw it and rewrite the show as a comic book, I feel that there is an angle to the Archer sees that Admiral as a kind of father figure that I don't think they really play into here. I know Archer has a real father, and his whole sort of motivation for being is that his father was not allowed by the Vulcans to do something. But I'd almost have Archer's dad died while Archer was really young or something, and this Archer is kind of a stand-in for his father in some ways. I think I would reconfigure that a little bit to make that relationship mean something more than just Archer checks in with this guy all the time about things.
Yeah, especially then you'd have the element of Archer's dad has a legacy that is taught in books, school books and stuff.
But Archer never knew his dad.
But
everyone knows his dad, but Archer never had a relationship with him. Yeah.
Exactly.
All right. Thank you very much, guys. At patreon.com/thepensky-file, patreon.com/thepensky-file if you want to support the show. Patrons make this possible. We would have stopped 5 years ago if it wasn't for Patreon. So they are the reason this podcast continues. And
which just goes to show you, some people will do anything, even for a tiny amount of money.
That's right. I will debase myself for you all. That's what this video function is for. But Patreon, it's much appreciated. It's the best way to support the show, and we appreciate it greatly, and keeps everything else going too. Let's see here. I think that's it. I don't have anything else to say about this. We'll have the recap video at some point before the next episode, which is Shockwave, so you have a little bit of a break. THX1138 is the Patreon content this month, and I'm going to be doing a commentary track for a Measure of Time. Is that the one? It's the TNG episode where the guy from the future comes back and tells everybody or the guy from the past comes back and he tells everybody he's from the future. Clay, do you have anything you want to say?
We got a new episode of Rotten Horror Picture Show. It came out this past week. We covered David Cronenberg's The Fly. And this week we have Fire from Olympus and Read My Lips from the Badass podcast. I was wrong. Last episode I thought it was Bullet for Bullock and Trial, but that's the next episode. Read My Lips is a good one. It's the first appearance of Scarface, the puppet.
Oh. Who holds the puppet?
A character named the Ventriloquist.
Okay, no, that's totally out of left field.
It's a really good episode though. It's two episodes where one is a rich guy who thinks he's the Greek god Zeus, and then the next one is a gangster puppet operated by a mousy ventriloquist. And in both episodes, there are moments where Batman's just sort of like, oh, okay.
They're like these villains in Gotham are just like mice in a house. It's just you just keep coming. And it's like this is
they just get weirder and weirder.
Yep. So check out Badass, check out Rotten Horror Picture Show, and stay subscribed to this one, the Star Trek podcast. That's it. We're done with season 1. We'll be back with a recap to formally wrap up season 1, and after that, we'll be on to season 2. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you for supporting the show. See ya.